investors have a passion for making money. And I love that. But every actor has a dollar value. Every actor. And you're so right, less money in than money out. And years ago, I met somebody who was very wealthy. I said, "Oh, how'd you get to be wealthy?" He said, "Well, you make a widget for 50 cents and you sell it for $1."
Take heed to what Joanne's going to walk through. So an investor who wants to fund a film project, but how about on the investor side? What are some of the specific things that an investor should look for when they're looking to potentially fund the film projects? Hi everybody, this is Nathan Myers back with the Raises.com Top Capital Raiser Show, where it's my job to tease out some of the best habits, traits, tactics, strategies of experts when it comes to people who help people raise capital, fund managers, bankers, and so on. And today I'm actually blessed to be with Joanne, who is an expert in film funding and film financing. So she's been in the non-for-profit world for about, I guess you could say, around 40 years. And she's been in the film sector, almost a decade now. And she's a total expert when it comes to the unique niche of assisting people in getting funding for their films. So Joanne, it's a great pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me. I know this is very different than your normal discussions about raising money, raising capital.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And when we had our brief discussion, I definitely was really intrigued with it. I think it's well needed for people to learn about how you do what you do. So perhaps in your words, just so you can acquaint yourself to the audience, if you could just walk through, your background, to greater detail, acquaint the audience with your expertise.
So thank you. As you said, my name is Joanne Butcher, and I got into film when I first moved to America in 1984 from London. And I was working with a nonprofit organization, which eventually I ran. And when I ran the organization, it became my responsibility to pay the bills. So in the nonprofit world, the fundraising includes grants and individual donors and events. And then, of course, we ran a cinema. We were open 365 days a year. No, 364 days a year. So we were selling tickets. So these are all different ways of raising money in the nonprofit world. And then I realized that filmmakers really needed to learn how to raise money. So I've been teaching filmmakers how to raise money for the last 20, 30 years. And 7 or 8 years ago, I switched direction. I had actually been sick for 7 years. I couldn't work for 7 years from illness. And I realized, I don't need to run an organization. I can work one-on-one with filmmakers. Now, when it comes to film, you can use all of those nonprofit ways, but once you start getting to budgets that are, I would say maybe even over $100,000, but definitely over $1 million, then actually the methodology to raise money for those kind of films tends to not be those nonprofit methods. It tends to be to raise money from investors. And so I have several clients who are making films at the $2 to $5 million level. I'm also working on a $12 million film right now. And in that particular, I call it a business model. When you're looking for investors, you have to be able to go to the investor and show them how they are going to make money on that film. And so that's what I do, and that's what I'm here talking to you about.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's such an interesting jump. And people listening to this podcast, I hope you take what she says and you apply it in your own situation. So maybe we can take a look at some of the biggest mistakes that your clients make when they raise money for film projects. I mean, are there any common patterns and mistakes that you see your clients make?
Well, when it comes to the filmmakers, the biggest mistake that they make is not understanding that investors are looking to make money on their films, right? So the film, to you, that's an obvious thing, but it is not to filmmakers. Filmmakers have this idea, okay, I'm going to make a film. I'm going to find some rich person. They're going to give me money. And they are 100% focused on, well, I have this great script and I have this great story. And so somebody with money is going to give me money and it's going to be great. And I'm like, hold up. So where is the business conversation here? How are you going to show this person how they're going to make money? And one of filmmakers' favorite words is passion. They're like, I have passion for my filmmaking. And I have an investor friend, and he came and taught with me on one of my classes. And he said, investors have a passion for making money. And I love that. I love that, because investors have a passion for making money. And so what my job to do is with filmmakers is to educate them on how to match that passion for making money with their passion for making films. And so I'm teaching them all this sort of business stuff that they've really never thought of before. But I'm like, if you in the film world, $100,000 film is called micro budget. I'm like, excuse me, $100,000 is a lot of money. So if somebody's going to invest in your film with $100,000, how are you going to make sure they're going to get it back? Right? If someone's going to invest $2 million in your movie, how are you going to make sure they're going to get it back? But I have a good script. No. No. Right. So, and then I think on the other side that the investors, what's fun for investors is when they learn that there's this thing called film that might be an interesting investment. I have a client right now. She's talking to a friend who's an investor in land. She and her family, they work together and they invest in land. And now my client has been educating her about film. And in fact, the investor is very excited about the idea. Now she just wants to understand it better, understand the what the business is. And this is the thing I think investors need to know. This is a very simple concept. A film is something that you can sell, and then you can sell it again, and then you can sell it again, and then you can sell it again. So I just canceled all my subscriptions and I've been watching Pluto TV, which I love Pluto TV. Pluto TV, which is free and advertising supported, was born 10 years ago last August. So advertising supported video on demand is an income stream for films that didn't even exist 10 years ago. Didn't even exist. And people are making millions of dollars on advertising supported video on demand, let alone all the other income streams, theatrical, TVOD, which is transactional video on demand, subscription video on demand. All of those exist and always did. But now we have a new one that's only 10 years old. And I was watching, what did I see? I watched this black and white film called Judgment from Nuremberg, which is a film with every star who was around in the 50s. And it's about the big trial at Nuremberg of all the people who were Nazis.
Wow.
It's making money.
Wow.
It's making money.
That's amazing. And so oh, sorry, go on. I don't want to throw it.
No, it was made in the 50s,
yeah.
And it's making money today.
Wow.
And every film is. Every film that you watch somewhere is making money today. It's making money for somebody today. So I find that for investors, when they learn about the unusual economic product that is film, they get very interested.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to take a. This is definitely why people should really take heed to what Joanne's going to walk through. So, an investor who wants to fund a film project So we talked a little bit about the biggest mistakes that people come in looking for investors make. But how about on the investor side? What are some of the specific things that an investor should look for when they're looking to potentially fund the film projects? And perhaps we could even go through some of those intricacies that you hinted at.
Yes. Well, what the investor needs to first of all be looking for is to make sure that they're talking to a filmmaker who can speak business, right? So a filmmaker who has not learned anything about the business, I probably wouldn't necessarily want to deal with them, So a filmmaker has to have learned that there's a cause and effect between how much money is spent and how much money is made. That's a very simple concept, but most filmmakers couldn't even begin to have that conversation, right? Most. So as long as you're working with somebody who is already on that wavelength, then, what I'd have to say is that what I have found is that investors are less interested in the smaller budget, the micro budget movies. They definitely are. They tend to want to be involved in the bigger budget movies that have A-list actors. And the way Hollywood works is that every actor has a dollar value. And that dollar value goes up and down. It's like the stock market, Sometimes Bitcoin is up, sometimes Bitcoin is down, right? So I always love to use the example of Denzel Washington. So let's imagine that today Denzel Washington is worth $20 million. So if I make a movie with Denzel Washington, it's going to make $20 million. In fact, if I make a movie today with Denzel Washington, I can pre-sell it for $20 million. I can pre-sell it before I've made the movie for $20 million. So I like to ask filmmakers, how much are you going to spend on your movie? And because a lot of them have not any thinking about money, they'll often say something like $30 million. I'm like, no. But what if we spend $10 million? What if we spend $10 million knowing that we have Denzel Washington, and Denzel Washington today is worth $20 million. He's probably worth a lot more, but I'm just making this up. $20 million today. Now we've spent $10 million. We know we're going to make 20. In fact, as I said, if I have Denzel Washington, I can pre-sell that and make that $20 million before I make the movie. So now I've made the movie for 10 million, I've made 20 million, but that movie is going to keep making money, keep making money, keep making money, keep making money. So if I were a filmmaker and I came to an investor and that investor saw that, yes, I really do have Denzel Washington. Yes, I really do have a film that I'm going to make for $10 million. There are all kinds of protections that investors can make sure are in place. For example, if I'm making a movie with Denzel Washington, we're going to have a bond company assigned. So they're a complete third-party level oversight. We can have a CAMA agreement in place so that everything is figured out, like where is the investor in the waterfall? Are they in first position, which is what they usually prefer? And how are the payouts made? All of that can be negotiated up front. So the investors actually have a lot of ways that they can be protected in that scenario. And right now, I'm working on this movie. It's a $12 million movie. We're looking for about 3 million in equity. We have all the other funding in place. And even with 4 British A-list actors in the film, investors are hesitant. That we have a very experienced producing team. One of the producers made a $10 million movie that has made $100 million. Those are the kind of people you want to be working with, right? But the investors are very hesitant. And so they want to do, for that 3 million, they want to do some debt financing as well as some equity, which we're able to offer them. So right now, investors seem to be particularly cautious. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it was to do with the strike. I'm not really sure, but they want to protect themselves, even with a great team, even with A-list actors, and that's fine to me. $3 million is not to be sneezed at.
Yeah. No, exactly. So like, and I remember in our early discussion, even I guess the remaining $9 million, or I guess the initial $9 million, because typically, in the other sectors, people may just get a loan or something like that. But how many different sources of capital do you see people get? I think you mentioned grants, et cetera, et cetera. So how is
no. None of this is anything to do with that non-profit way of raising money whatsoever. Okay. But it is, so this particular film, it's an American producing team. The film is going to be shot in England. It's based on a book that's actually the first of a series of books that has a worldwide millions of people audience, right? And so ideally, we're going to make this film and then there'll be a franchise. So investors who come in will also be in first place on the series, the series that will come later, the franchise.
Nice.
So so in the UK, actually, we're having a meeting with the UK Film Commission because they just made a big announcement and they've increased their tax credits. And I'm going to make this up, so don't quote me, but from something like 25% to 45%. So what that would mean is, of this $12 million movie, let's call it 6 million will be spent in England and 6 million will be spent in Canada, where the post-production is going to happen. So of that $6 million, the UK is going to give 45% back. It's a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
But that money comes after the money has been spent, after the 6 million has been spent. So the equity investor has the opportunity to finance that 45% of $6 million. I'm very bad at math, so you have to excuse me. So it's almost $3 million, right? Almost $3 million. And they can finance that $3 million and they'll make money on that transaction. Then the other 6 million will be spent in Canada, and Telefilm, which is the Canadian film organization, government organization, they've already put in some money.
Yeah.
And they're also putting in tax credits. And so in the end, you end up with all these different pieces that add up to the puzzle. And we have this remaining $3 million. Oh, another piece is pre-sales. So we have pre-sales in Europe, pre-sales in somewhere else that adds up to several $1 million. So the 9 that we already have is all these different pieces of money plus some equity in from the
Got
producers.
it. Okay, that makes sense. So, and I think you mentioned like on the initial call we had is the region doesn't really have a giant, like let's say there's a UK film or a US film or a Canadian film. Are there any big changes in terms of like how the financing works for it?
Big changes in what sense?
Yeah, so I mean the way that people go about vetting a film to invest in, or the deal structure of the film. Like, are there any big differences based on region?
Oh, well, there's one huge difference, which is that America does not invest in film. America as a whole does not invest in film. Every other country in the world invests in film.
Wow.
So, so I'm based in Miami. So Miami just announced a new tax credit. So they're now offering a 10% tax credit. That is not going to beat out a New Jersey or an Atlanta that has something like a 40% tax credit, right? The reason that Atlanta has blown up in terms of filmmaking is because Atlanta and Georgia decided that they wanted to give that kind of tax credit. And everybody's running to Georgia to make their movies and running away from Florida because Florida ended their tax credits some 15, 20 years ago. There's a sort of Republican idea that tax credits for film is some kind of, I don't know, but anyway, they're against it. I don't understand it because it's a way that states can bring massive, I'm talking billions.
Wow.
Atlanta and Georgia are bringing billions and billions of dollars in terms of spend from films. And we used to have that, particularly in Miami, but also in Florida. We used to have that. You know, we had Miami Vice, we had Criminal Minds Miami, we had series after series. So the jobs, the income, the impact, the economic impact on a community is absolutely massive. And so states are regularly using these kind of tax incentives to bring that kind of business. I had a client in Minnesota, is that right? Minnesota, and between the tax incentives from this one city and then from the state as a whole, he was going to be getting something like 75% tax credits.
Wow.
But states are using it to bring business to their state. And the more impoverished the place, the more they want the business, because it's a great business, it's a very clean business. So every country in the world except America does that at the government level.
Okay.
They provide tax incentives, and it's worth millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, I wasn't aware. That's
yes. So if we took our $20 million, if we took our $10 million movie with Denzel Washington, right, and then we make it in England, and they're going to give us 45% tax credit, we spend 10 million, right? We get 45% back. So we spend 10 million, we get $4.5 million back, and we already made $20 million on our movie in pre-sales.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's such an interesting, it almost reminds me of, for folks listening to this in different sectors, it's kind of like the after repair value of a deal when you have like the, both the state that supports you and you do pre-sales. You already know that you're going to have a certain quote unquote exit value or after film value. And I think it just seems to be making sure it's like input lower than output. And I think as long as people have that, then, you know, work with somebody like Joanne to, you know, show you the structure and the ropes. And, you know, this is a really interesting, it's really interesting how it's just almost the same in different sectors. For how investors just want their money. Who would have thought, right? So
yeah, it's just that you know, film is, I mean, these deals can be complex, but I don't think more complex than anything else. It's just that in the film world, the actor is the one that defines the value. And right. And so, as I said, I'm lowballing Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington is probably worth more than $20 million, but every actor has a dollar value. Every actor. And you're so right, less money in than money out. And years ago, I met somebody who was very wealthy. I said, oh, how'd you get to be wealthy? He said, well, you make a widget for 50 cents and you sell it for $1. And so the film is the widget. The film is the widget, except with a widget, you can only sell it once. With a film, right? So let's say now we pre-sell our movie, and let's say that's theatrical rights in the US and Europe, let's call it. I can still sell my film in Africa.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another 20 million, right? I can still sell my film in Australia. That's another. So that all these monies from all these different places, and I haven't even gone on to a streaming platform yet, right? So the same film is making money and then making money and then making money and then making money and then making money.
No, exactly. So when it comes to even, so somebody on the buy side, let's say on the buy side, who's looking to get into a relationship and network with these, I guess, filmmakers, or even somebody who's a filmmaker, they're looking to find investors, you know, instead of just, you know, making a blast on LinkedIn or something, How do you think people in this business?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Right? Right? So how do people go about, because it seems like there's a lot of networking that's involved to find the better filmmakers from the ones that are more, I guess, more new and they don't know their left from the right. So how do people go around networking in this type of business?
Well, all I can say right now is call me, how would you go about networking? I guess you could go to parties where Hollywood people hang out. But yeah, I think, especially if it's your first time, you choose a really experienced team. And there can be, different levels. I have a new producer I'm working with. Well, it's really cool. He's 80 years old. And he's already made a couple of films, and he's got a bunch more that we're talking about me working on with him. And he makes films at like the $1.5 million level, but he always has a bunch of actors from The Sopranos, for example. So they already have a big following, a big audience. So I think that having it when you first want to get involved, you want to work with teams that are very, very experienced. And I have this one friend. He raises money for films, and one of the films he was raising money from was the last Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
So I don't remember. Let's call it $100 million budget. But what he found was that for his investors, they were so far at the end of the chain that the opportunity to make money was not that interesting. So it's an incredible team, an incredible franchise. Of course, it's going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. But the investors, by the time he got involved, they were so far down the chain. So that doesn't sound to me very interesting or exciting either, but very guaranteed, So these would be things to weigh up, But in my $10 million Denzel Washington example, that there's a lot of money to be made. And the thing about film is that we know that there are films that have those stars that are flops and don't make money. But I would say that the concept of don't make money is a little misunderstood. So those bad films are still making money today. If you see what I'm saying, like, there was this terrible film, Waterworld, I think it is, with Mel Gibson, that was made maybe 20 years ago. Terrible film. And big news. It didn't make money. No, it didn't make money in its first window. Or they'll say, oh, well, we spent $100 million. We only made 150 million. That's terrible. They talk like that all the time. But it's only the first window. There are all these other windows where the film is going to make money, and that bad film is still making money today.
Wow.
So there's a lot of, when I started out, the box office numbers were not in the general press. Now, in the general press, the box office numbers come out. And they talk about films as being flops because they didn't make double their budget in the first week. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. So there's all this information out there that makes it sound as though it's this crazy field where people are losing money all the time. Oh, no, that is not true. That is not true.
Wow. And yeah, I see this all the time. Like I see, flop or like, I just try to subtract the money that they, they say they make, and then that their budget and all this, and then try to come up with what's the profit. So, so I understand that at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned there are all these new streaming platforms and things. So how is it that they're making money in a long term again? Is it some sort of royalty deal or they're selling IP to some channel or something? Or how does that work?
Okay, so let's say
Yeah.
I'm in the business of making forks, right? I'm going to sell you my fork. That's it. My transaction is done. Okay. With a film, my first window is theatrical. So I put it in the theater. I'm going to make my Denzel Washington movie for $10 million. I pre-sold it for 20 before it even went into the theater. Then I'm going to make more money on it in the theater. Let's say I make $50 million from my movie. But that's only in the theater. The only numbers you ever see in the press are the theater. That's the only numbers you ever see. Because my movie now goes on to, let's call it Netflix. And Netflix pays me $40 million for my movie. You're never going to know that number. You're never going to know that. That's never going to be public. Netflix will never share its numbers. Right? So I made $50 million in the theater. Now I just made $40 million in my sale to Netflix. I licensed Netflix my film for 2 years for that sale. It's not Netflix's movie. It's my movie. I licensed it to Netflix for 2 years. They gave me $40 million. Now, at the end of 2 years, Netflix, because they have their numbers, they have their data that they don't share with anybody else. Now they're going to negotiate with me for another 2 years. Now, how much money am I going to make? Well, it depends. Depends on what Netflix's numbers are showing.
Yeah.
But let's say it's doing really well, and now Netflix wants to pay me $20 million for another 2-year license. That's how film works. When Netflix can no longer either pay me what I want to be paid, or I can go somewhere else. I can take it to another window, which I was talking about, advertising supported video on demand. Now my movie is now on Pluto TV or Tubi or all these free platforms. Now those platforms don't pay me money, although that's changing, but that's kind of in the weeds. But anyway, now the money is made from the viewer who watches and is also willing to watch that Burger King commercial. So now the income for my movie is on a rev share basis paid for by advertisers. So depending on how many hundreds of thousands or millions of hours of viewership is how I'm making money on my movie. So a friend of mine who made a very low budget, like $500,000, I think, movie 40 years ago is making more money today than he has made in the last maybe 30 years. It's a very interesting business. Very interesting.
Yeah, nobody talks about this, eh? Like everyone just talks about the front end of it, and they don't talk about these. This is kind of like the black box of it.
Yes.
And it seems to be where the real money is. So.
It is where the real money is. And the one thing that's hard is that we have very little data to be able to talk about where the real money is, because that information is all private. So the only way we find out is if a filmmaker is willing to share those numbers. But like Netflix is never going to share those numbers. Yeah. So we don't really know, but definitely the theatrical box office is only the beginning. And in the indie world, and $10 million still comes under the independent world, we consider the box office as marketing. So all the screens that it's on all around the world, that's all marketing for the sale in the either the transactional video on demand or the subscription video on demand. It's all marketing. So if we make our $40 million or 50, I forget what numbers I use, $50 million around the world, that's $50 million worth of marketing. That's how the independent world sees that.
Oh, so okay. So would you say that the way that the
I'm
world is
hearing
going
this. I'm a bit of an outsider, obviously, compared to you, obviously. So, do you think that the way that things are going, the theater attendance and things like that are going down, and the IP, the licensing deals, the streaming platforms, do you think that that's where the future is headed in the future of film, and where
the
No, I don't think that's right at all, because it's, to me, it's the wrong way of seeing it.
okay.
It's simply a window. It's not an either or, it's an and, and, and. So for all the talk of theater attendance going down, we just had Barbenheimer this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I stopped following the numbers. So, but Oppenheimer was made, I think, for 100 million, and it made 200 million before I stopped looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
Right. So it may double its money in the theater. It could be at 300 million by now. Nobody's reporting on it anymore. So maybe there are fewer people going to the movie theaters, but one movie last year made $200 or $300 million. That's not nothing. That's something. And Barbie made more. I just happen to remember the Oppenheimer numbers. So it's not that it's going away. It's just that it's and, because now it's made its $200 or $300 million, and when it stops making money, next it will go to TVOD, and then it'll make another $100 million or whatever. Again, we don't know.
Wow.
And then it'll go to SVOD, and it'll make another $100 million. And then it'll go to AVOD, but that's going to be 10 years down the road. You know.
Wow.
Or longer.
Yeah, no, it's such an interesting world, and thanks for kind of showing us a bit underneath the iceberg of film financing, the part that people don't really talk about or know about, except for the industry experts. So, like, I think now that you've told the audience about how the business works, where do you think, or I guess, where's the best place for people to get in touch with you? And I guess, what are some of the things that you'd like to share with them to get them to, maybe they have questions for you, they want to work with you, or they want to potentially invest in a film, etc.
Sure. Well, my social media handle is always Joanne Film, JoannEFILM, Joanne Film. So you can find me on social media. My name is Joanne Butcher, and my business is called Filmmaker Success. So any of those ways, my email is joanne@filmmakersuccess.com. So any of those ways to find me, and I'd love to meet you. I'd love to meet people on the investing side who want to learn as well. I'm used to teaching filmmakers, but I really think that once investors find out what a very interesting business this is,
Oh, 100%. And obviously, for those listening, if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify, the notes we'll have the show notes of where to reach out to Joanne. We'll put that all there, and make sure that you reach out to her as per those show notes, because Joanne has a brilliant mind. I really enjoy the conversation, and even if you're not in film or you're not actively investing in film, still get in touch with her, because these principles definitely do apply to a lot of you in different industries who don't even think about the investor first. Or if you're an investor, you want to get into this type of business, now is the time to really learn about how to expand your portfolio. So continue to work with Joanne. And as we close, what was something of everything, what is something that you'd like the audience to remember? It could be a sentence, an idea. Just what would be the one major takeaway you want everyone to leave the show with?
I think of all businesses to invest in, film is a very interesting arena. And it's because it's so special that you can keep selling something, that it isn't a one and done thing. It's something that you never let go of it. You hold on to that license and you license it out. So I just think that's the fundamental concept that I
Oh,
want.
fantastic. Joanne Butcher, everyone. Make sure you reach out to her. This has been a really fascinating podcast. Apply it in your own business. And for those in the film financing niche, you already have your answers on what to do next. So Joanne, great to have you on here.
What to do next. So Joanne, great to have you on here.
More than